In this video, we're going to go ahead and begin using our body base as a live surface object and building our final character topology. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing we're going to need to do is get rid of some of these image planes and this character reference box for our height when we were measuring the height. So let's come over here and just hide those two layers. And let's select our character base, and we're going to come up here to this little magnet next to no live surface. We're going to go ahead and select that. What that's going to do is make this a live object, and we'll be able to draw our topology directly onto this surface. Kind of think of it as snapping to grid, but instead of snapping to the grid, we're snapping to this object. So let's go ahead and come up here to our modeling toolkit. Go ahead and show that, and come down to quad draw. Now what quad draw is going to allow us to do is draw our topology directly onto our live surface. And to do that, all we have to do is left click anywhere on the object, and that's going to create a point or a vertice on our object. So we can create another one by left clicking again. And when we've clicked 4 of them, we have 4 points to make up a quad. To create the quad, you hold down Shift and mouse in between the 4 points that you wish to create the face on, and then just left click. So I held down Shift, I moused in that area, and I left clicked. So again, I had to have 4 points. To show you that again, let's say I'm down here, I create 4 points by left clicking on my mouse. Then I hold down Shift, and you'll see that we get this yellow highlight, and if I left click with Shift held down, it will create the face. And I can also join two faces together because here I have 1, 2, 3, 4 points, so I can hold down Shift in between them and left click and create another face. So now that I have some faces created, let's talk about manipulating these faces. You can move the face around by just mousing over it, and you'll notice that it highlights in red when I do. You can also move the edges by highlighting the edge. So I moused over the edge, it turns red. That means I can left click on it and drag it around. And I can also move the points around by highlighting the point. You can see that it gave me this little red circle when I moused over the point. I can left click on that and drag my mouse around. Now something to take note of is because this is sort of snapping, or rather it is snapping to this live surface. So these points are going to try to stay on this live surface. Regardless of where I move this point to, it's going to stay on our live surface. Now this is going to allow us to create our topology for a character model to exacting specification. We'll be able to literally draw out our topology 1 point at a time to create a new quad, and now we have these quad faces created. Now sometimes while you're doing this, you may have a little hard time straightening out these faces. Like let's say I were to create another row here of points and hold down Shift and then just create some more. And let's say I did that one more time just to get the example out there of what I'm talking about, and I left click and I just drag some more. Some of these aren't very straight and they're not really flowing very well with the body. Well, what you can do is hold down your Shift key and you'll notice that you get this little paintbrush that says relax. Now what relax is going to do is it's going to try to move. When I left click, you see I'm left clicking, I'm dragging the mouse, and it's kind of moving that and straightening it out to better fit the live surface object. And I can go not only horizontally, but I can also hold down Shift and go vertically. And you can see it kind of is forming this shape a little bit better. And it's best not to do it on the edges. It's best to do it inside. Now let's say I've created some topology here just by left clicking, dropping some points into the scene, and then holding down Shift, mousing in between those 4 points, and creating faces. And let's say all of a sudden I decide, uh-oh, I don't want one of these faces. I can hold down Control plus Shift, and you'll notice I get this X, and that's telling me that I can delete that face. So I can also delete edges, and that'll delete that whole face, because without that edge, this face cannot exist. So it'll delete the point and these two edges along with that face. So you can also delete a row of edges. So let's say I want to delete this whole row. I don't like the way it laid out. I can just mouse over any one on the inside middle and then left click, and it'll delete that row. And then I can hold down Control, and while holding down Control, you'll notice I get this yellow line. This yellow line is telling me that if I left click, it will create a new row. You'll notice that, let's say I move this one up and it's kind of out of order, right? I can hold down Control plus Shift to delete that row of edges. then hold down Control and create a new one, and notice now it's nice and straight. So these are all just little tricks using relax. You can relax faces, you can relax edges, you can relax just a single point to kind of get the topology nice and straight. You can also hold down Control plus Shift to delete. So think of holding down Shift as smoothing and creating a polygon face, and Control plus Shift as your delete when you want to remove something. Hold down Control plus Shift. And when you just want to create a point, you just left click. So that's all there is to using the quad draw. So I'm going to go ahead and leave quad draw and delete this because that was just to show you how quad draw works. And I'm going to go ahead and open quad draw again. I'm going to start down here in this area near the pelvis. I'm going to go ahead and create a row of faces going around the leg. Now, because this is kind of a tight area here, sometimes I would go about this different ways. I would probably duplicate the body and delete one of the legs from it, but I'm just going to go ahead and keep this simple. I'm just going to go down a little bit lower where I have more room to work with on the inside and create a ring of polys going around this leg. So to do this, all I got to do is just left click, and I'm going to try to keep the topology as simple as possible. So I don't want to add a whole bunch of edges here. I just want to keep it very simple so that way I can add more edges later after I've gotten the shape a little bit better. So again, I'm just creating a ring going around one of the legs, just adding some edges here and there as I go around it. And this is primarily because, again, it's a little bit of a pinched area in here to work with. So I'm kind of going a little bit lower where I have a little bit more room and creating this ring. So again, I'm just left clicking to create my points, hold down Shift, and I click to create the poly faces. Now that I have this ring of polys going around, I'm going to go ahead and move it into place. So I can also move out. If I zoom out, I get a lot better view of those faces. It's just very dark on this gray surface. And sometimes if you're having a hard time seeing it because you've created your topology really low resolution on this high resolution model and it kind of cuts away edges, you can zoom out some, and that will make it a lot more apparent. Now I have this ring going around this leg. I'm just going to go ahead and drag some of these faces up. So I'm just going to select this poly here, and I'm going to go ahead and select this point here, and just kind of move these into place where I want them. Just doing this with all the way around the model, and just kind of placing them sort of in this ring going around the pelvis. So grab this one here, kind of move it up. And again, we'll be able to shape this a lot better as we go along. We're just right now getting this crease going around this area. Because remember in the previous video, we talked about character topology and we decided that this leg, this thigh, is going to need to be able to crease into this torso when the character sort of crouches. So we need to have an edge there, allowing the character to animate in that fashion whenever we skin it. So again, I'm just grabbing these points and placing them where I want them. And again, they are snapping to this live surface. They are staying right on top of this live surface. And after I get them in a pretty good spot, I will go ahead and move on. Now I'm going to try to keep this as close to shape in that area as possible. And one of the things you'll notice is that as we've done this, again, those edges are getting really hard to see, so I'm having to zoom out to get a better view of them. One thing you can do is you can hold down Control, and you see this yellow line that's going around it. Think of this like an edge loop. It's going to add a ring of edges, and it's also going to snap that ring of edges to the surface, thus splitting each of the faces and helping form them a little bit better. So again, this is why we're keeping our topology very simple for now, because we can add these edge loops in here just by holding down Control and clicking, and you'll notice that it's quickly taking the form of our live surface object. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control plus C, delete those. I might add one here because again, I want to keep the topology as simple as possible. And now I want to just go ahead and drag these down to the bottom of the leg. So I'm just going to grab each of these edges and just drag them down. And a lot of times it is faster if you just grab the edge as opposed to grabbing one point at a time, because you're moving 2 points at a time when you do it in this fashion. So there we go. I might want to come down here and maybe separate these some. Kind of divide them a little bit better and continue to move these edges down to the bottom of the leg. You can see I'm doing this pretty quick. I'm getting this thing put together. Now you got to be careful not to collapse, because you can actually collapse 2 points on one another. Let me show you that. For example, if I were to take this point and drag it over, you'll notice it kind of snaps to that other point, and that's going to create a try when I do that, and I don't want tries. I want to keep this as quads So I'm going to make sure that as I'm moving these down, I'm not accidentally snapping them together. So I'm just creating this topology. Very easy to do, does not take much time to do. So again, I'm just dragging this down to the base of the leg. I'm going to go ahead and grab this one here, drag it down to the base of the leg. Now I'm going to come down, before I add any more edge loops going around this, I'm going to go ahead and come down here and I'm going to try to separate these evenly. So I'm going to try to distribute these even spaces going around this ankle for our character. Let's kind of try to separate them a bit. I'm also going to kind of look at the angle that these edges are going, because I might have to make adjustments to that. Paying very close attention to the location of each of these points while I have the object very simple to work with. Because as we add edge loops, it's going to get more complex and there will be more to move. So we have to be very careful as we're working to try to keep things simple. This looks good. Kind of look at the flow of my edges. They all look pretty nice here. I definitely want to have like a row of edges sort of going down the side of the character. I think all of these should probably move back some. I'm going to kind of move that back a little bit. And I guess as a result, all of these sort of need to rotate back. Just making adjustments here. This is time consuming, but this is an important factor for character modeling. You need to get a very, very accurate topology. So this looks good. I think that those edges are nice and separated, not too far apart. Everything looks very even. And once I have it close, I can add a few more edge loops in here. So I'll go ahead and near the knee, and I'll add one here. And I'll come down here where I can see it needs to come way out, and I'll just add a ring there. You'll notice it's quickly shaping as I add these edge loops. Again, I'm holding down Control and just clicking anywhere, and you can see that I get this ring. And it's telling me, okay, you can add an edge loop around there. Before I add any more than just the one by the knee, I want to kind of get this area. Again, this is an area where there's going to need to be a crease right behind the knee. So I need to have an edge allowing for these faces to collapse to these faces. So I can fold this area up when this character crouches down. So you got to pay a lot of attention to your topology, because I have to make sure that I have these creases, these edges, anywhere I need a crease to occur when we animate it. This looks pretty good. So we have this area taken care of. Let's go ahead and add an edge loop right here behind the knee, and we'll add one edge loop going right here around this leg. So this is very, very low poly topology we're working with right now. And what we want to do is, with character creation, we need to pay a little bit of attention to areas like the kneecap, because we did kind of collapse this area here, but we need to kind of line out where that kneecap is going to be. So I'm going to add an edge loop right here, and I'm going to kind of bring these in, just so I can kind of simulate in my topology that there is a kneecap here. And this is kind of goes along the same lines where we need a crease. We also need an area where this area is going to bulge out. So we need to have our topology designed in such a way to prevent stretching. That'll make a lot of sense as you go along and you've done this a few times around and you've done the whole process. You'll say, okay, adding these little areas in my topology that kind of outlines where that kneecap is exactly is going to help the overall effect. It's going to make it look nicer whenever it's done. So there's our kneecap there. You could even add an extra one, but I'm not going to right now. I'm just going to leave it simple. So now I can see that's right where that kneecap is, and I kind of shaped the topology to show there's a kneecap there. Now go ahead and spend a little bit of time cleaning up your topology and just looking at the way your edges are flowing across your model and making slight adjustments as you go along in between each video. Try to take a little bit of time on your own and just clean up the way your edges are flowing. Kind of just pan around looking at a certain row of edges and think, okay, I can move it here and move it there to kind of clean it up. So in the next video, we're going to go ahead and continue to build our geometry by creating the arm before we connect the arm and the leg by creating the torso. If you have any questions or comments, please post below the video on brainpoof.com and click subscribe to follow us on YouTube.